Welcome to After 5 p.m., where we clock out at mortgages at 5 p.m. and clock into life, family, and finances.
We're here with a guest by the name of Carl Wright with R1 Appraisals. I'm excited to have him as a guest here. Carl and I have multiple overlaps, right? Carl's younger brother, Doug, and I were really close in high school, best friend in high school. Got to know Carl at a very personal level there, right? And then to have us cross paths in the real estate industry, working together professionally for coming up on 2 decades. A little bit about Carl. Actually, I'm not sure where you were born. Were you born in Orem?
Yeah, well, Provo, Orem
Okay.
area, Utah County. Yeah.
Okay, Utah County boy. Went to Mountain View High School, where he had a passion for athletics, specifically in the sport of football, and got into the appraisal industry there in Utah County. Worked there, I believe, for a number of years before he moved down to St. George. Been in the business for 20 years, has had his own appraisal company for 17 of those, and has branched out to just about all of the neighboring states that connect to Utah, outside of Colorado, with offices in Idaho, up and down I-15 corridor, down into Mesquite and Las Vegas. You mentioned Arizona. Where in Arizona?
Phoenix, the Phoenix
area.
Metro. Yeah, we cover the whole Phoenix Metro area as well.
So you've got a good footprint. So Carl, thank you for taking the time to join us on the podcast.
You bet. Thanks
Yeah,
for
thanks,
having me. This is exciting. I've known Shaun and Ben for quite a while, and done mortgages or done appraisals for both of them, and for several years for different companies, and we've had a great business relationship, but more importantly, Ben, you and I have had a great friendship for lots of years. So I appreciate I'm actually really flattered that I'm one of your first guests to be on your podcast. So I'm actually really flattered. So thank you for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you. We just know that the podcast, for those who might be listening for the first time, Shaun and I are co-hosting the podcast. He and I worked together for the same company for a number of years. We are currently not. We're both branch managers for different mortgage companies. But it was some of the key conversations we had after 5 p.m. that really created a bond between the two of us. And some of those key conversations, we thought, why not turn on a mic, make it public, and if anybody can benefit from a nugget here or there, then all the merrier. So
Yeah, some of my best memories working with Ben. You grind all day, and then it's 5 p.m. and you're kind of chilling, and then it's stuff after work, and it's, hey, tell me about your family, tell me about what you're investing in, like what's exciting outside of your 9 to 5, and so this is kind of the fruition of that, and we're excited to have you on.
I love it because these are the conversations where you really get intimate and you get to know somebody. And so hopefully we can dive a little bit into that, if not in all of our lives, and be a little bit more vulnerable of who we really are and what makes us tick.
Yeah. So let's jump in though with the first question I have is the appraisal industry. I don't think there's too many people that grow up and say, man, I'm going to be a real estate agent. I'm going to be an appraiser. I'm definitely not going to be a mortgage banker, right. Mortgage loan officer. Tell me how you crossed paths with the mortgage industry and got into it in the first place.
Super. Kind of a funny story. So I was, I got back from my mission. I served in Chicago for my church. I served a 2-year LDS mission there in Chicago, came back and was going to school, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was going to Utah Valley, UVU, Utah Valley University, and met this really cute girl named Danielle, and we started dating. And I was coaching football at the time, and I was my plan was to get my degree in teaching and actually get into seminary and teach seminary and coach football, because that was one of my passions. I loved coaching football. And in fact, as a side note, my very first coaching experience at the high school level was Ben and his age group. He was a sophomore in high school. I had just graduated, and I was didn't have a lot to do, and my younger brother was his age, and so I started coaching. Your team is so honestly, Ben, you and your group is like had such a huge impact on me. And it's kind of crazy that it's laid me all the way to here. So that's what I wanted to do. teach seminary, coach football. And so my amazing bride, she was like, okay, well, I totally support you. We'll do this. Like, so she's like, I know that I'm going to have to work because being a seminary teacher and coaching football, you're not going to make that much money. So she went and she responded to an ad in a paper for a secretary job, and it was at an appraisal office. And so she went to the appraisal office, and she worked there for 3 or 4 months, and she started to get the ins and outs. And she's like, Carl, this is actually a really cool business. You should come meet my boss. His name's Steve. So I went in and met Steve, and we hit it off like instantly. Like we were best friends. He was coaching his son's football team. I was coaching football. We had that in common. And so that got me my foot in the door. And I just asked him one day, like, what does it take to become an appraiser? How do you get into this? He's like, you want a job? I'll give you a job. And he's like, and I was like, I had no idea. I didn't even know what an appraisal was. Sure. And so
how old were you at this point?
I was 24.
Okay.
24. Yeah. And so I did some training with him. We got married, and that's it. I worked in Utah County for about 2 years. And my business partner, Nick Lyman, who you know, Nick and I grew up together as well, played football together, and he got married a little bit before I did, moved into the next door. We shared a duplex together. We were in one side, they were in the other side, and I got Nick into the business. We moved down here in 2006, worked for...
Time out. How long was Nick in that duplex?
Maybe about, I don't know, couple years.
He had to have been in there, because if you were on the other side of the duplex and moved out, Doug and I and a couple others rented that same side that you were in, and he was my neighbor.
Yes, that's right. So that's where it all started, dude. That's where it all started. See, look at all these connections. So that's how it all started. Yeah. We built a house down in Payson, and then we decided to move to down here to St. George because I was commuting. I was like, why am I commuting down here? Let's just open an office down here. So I convinced Steve to open an office for us. We moved down in 2006, in September of 2006. And we worked for about 18 months with Steve, and then everything tanked. The market crashed. Steve lost everything, and Nick and I were like, hey, let's jump in right now. It's better time than never, right? So we started R1 Appraisals in March of 2008, which is like, you know.
You look at that date and everyone else was getting out and you're getting in.
Yeah, but here's the thing though, and I'll tie this back into kind of business, right? You can. There's two perspectives, right? It's the worst time to jump into the mortgage industry, but I look at it as like the absolute best time to start in the mortgage industry. Here's why. When you start and everything's given to you, you take it for granted, and you don't have to hustle. Nick and I, we busted our butts. We had to hustle because there was very few orders out there and very few people out there that were doing mortgages. And so it forced us to get in with the right people. It forced us to get in front of people. It forced us to get a good processes in place. And we made it through that downturn. And thankfully, by the grace of God, we were able to get our foot in the door with enough people that we made it through the worst time in the housing industry. And so, it really comes down to your mindset of like, was it the worst time or was it the best time? I think it was the best time because it made us lay the groundwork, have a solid foundation, and that's what's got us through this. I've had other guys who I've trained who've got into the industry when it was really hot, right? And then the last 2.5 years, it's been really slow, and they didn't have the groundwork because it was just so easy. It was just so easy. There's so many refinances, so many different things.
But I want to jump in on that and say I totally agree with everything that you're saying. You're focusing on the grinding side. I think a lot of people setting themselves up for success in the real estate world, equally as important as the grind is their money management. Yeah, there are just too many people that have the potential to make money and make money quick in this industry. Then they get used to spending it. Yeah. And then when there's a downturn, they're just so used to living a more lavish lifestyle.
Right. That they can't meet it.
That's the part I just look at it and go, man, if people can develop that delayed gratification,
So if you were to give somebody here, I'm going to turn into the host here. So if you, Ben, because you've been very, very wise with your money, and you've got a lot of different things that I followed you as far as like investment properties and things like that. What would you say to somebody? How do you get started? If you were to give one people a nugget of like, how do you save money? What would you say?
How do you save money?
Yeah, or what principles do you live by that gets you ahead financially?
I'll give you a quick little nugget of just what I learned earlier in my career when I started collecting some checks that were larger than normal, right? This was back when online banking was just starting to become quite easy. This is back when everyone's still on their BlackBerry, so maybe it wasn't easy on their phone, but easy to pull up on the on a web browser and check your bank accounts. What I found is when I would get a decent paycheck, I would allow myself to spend more money, and the best analogy I can use is restaurant, right? When you open up your account and there's a few $1,000s in there, rather than going and getting a hamburger with your college buddies at Five Guys or Wendy's dollar menu, you would justify going to Applebee's or Outback. And I found doing this over and over again that at the end of the month, I'm like, man, I'm kind of disappointed on how much money I spent on food or things like that, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I did personally, just kind of identifying that in my personality, I created an account with an online bank. It was Orange. ING. Do you guys remember ING?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So ING Orange, Capital One eventually bought them out, but they had a high yield savings account, and I started putting my direct deposit into that institution. Mm-hmm. Then I had a reoccurring set amount of budgeted money to live off of that then, a couple days after, would transfer into my credit union account. Mm-hmm. And my goal was I lived off of what came into that Mountain America. It didn't matter how much money I made. That was the budget that I set for myself, and it would help me stop doing the overspending here or there.
Yeah.
And what I found is I would let the ING account grow enough to where there was enough money in it to go, okay, there's a down payment for an investment property. But what I found with myself, Carl, is when I would go and buy that investment property, my desire to grind, my desire to work harder elevated, and a little bit of that was fear, right? Your nest egg is gone.
Yeah.
I want to replenish.
Yeah.
And then you would string a few good months together and start building back up. And so that was it helped me teach myself about motivation, what motivated me that way, and it forced me to live off of a budget.
Yeah.
So I know it was a lot longer answer than you were expecting.
No, that's actually really cool. I reversed it. So like you put all your money and you just save, you budgeted for that. I did it the reverse way where I budgeted for my savings.
Sure.
So everything like when I was 18, I read one of my top 5 books called The Richest Man in Babylon. Have you guys ever read that book?
Yeah.
Like if you're new to the real estate industry or new to finances, read that book. And the one principle is that a portion of everything you earn is yours to keep. Mm-hmm. And I learned that principle early on. And so 10% minimum of everything I earn, I go into my nest egg, right? And I don't touch it no matter what. Like that is a non-negotiable thing. I don't touch it. And that 10% has grown and grown and grown. And then I had enough money for my first investment property. And then I build it up and I buy another investment property and then I build it up. And
so has that always been real estate focused though? When you started saving for that, was that?
Yes, that was the initial focus. I've gone into other things that I've lost money on, but like that's a whole nother podcast. But like
his crypto mistakes.
Yeah, exactly, right? Crypto machines and all that good stuff. So, but no, real estate is the only thing that I've ever gotten ahead on.
Yeah.
Ever. So the market, crypto, everything that I've dabbled in that I'm not super familiar with, I've always lost money. But what real estate, because I know real estate, I know values, I know rents, I know contracts, I know those things. Like I just have to stick to what I know.
Sure.
And that's one of the great benefits of getting into the real estate market, whether you're a loan officer, whether you're a real estate agent, whether you're an appraiser, it gives you a basis of how the industry works. Mm-hmm. And
to assess risk.
To assess your risk. Yeah, for sure.
So in that same, because I'm just hearing you two, between the two different methodologies. So when it got low on the balance, did you that hustle like increase then? You saw, hey, I've only got $1,000 in there now. Did that push you to go work harder then?
Yeah, for me it did, but I also just trusted in the process. Like if I'm consistent, consistency plus time equals success, right? So every time I'm consistent with saving 10 or 20% of my check over time, that's gonna build. So I never panicked because the process is in place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like, and I've never, and I think Ben alluded to it. Like he had his budget and he stayed within his budget. So you just make sure you budget what you have, right? And so your income may vary, but your budget never varies. That's why I like the other way of like, no matter what I make, I'm saving that, and then I have extra to go do my thing, if that makes sense. So.
And one thing to kind of expound on the way that I looked at my budget is, being in the mortgage industry now, 16 years. Of course, I've had to increase that budget, right? Having kids.
Kids.
Upgrading a house here or there. But I think a lot of people make the mistake of going from driving the work model pickup truck and immediately going to the top of the line.
Right.
But yet there's 4 or 5 stepping stones where you could still upgrade, but not go straight to the top.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's why I tried to focus, my wife and I, is you can enjoy life. You can increase your lifestyle But I always feared of upgrading something, right? And it's easy to use examples of materialistic things like a pickup truck and then have to downgrade later. I wanted to make sure that my financial decisions, when I finally did make an upgrade, I never had to worry about going backwards.
Yeah.
So that was a mental relationship with money of what wired me. But to answer your question, heck yeah. When I would buy an investment property with that money and that account was depleted, it got me laser focused. I wasn't necessarily like worried, but I found myself dialed in a little more, right? I was spent more time in 5th gear, where I find a lot of people in our industry kind of get comfortable in 3rd or 4th and just never quite open it up. And so.
Yeah, the Grant Cardone, he says 2 times a year he goes broke. So like half the year, and it's the same thing. He'll have all this money, and then he'll go, buy a big apartment complex or something. But it gets him back into that, not like broke mindset, but it's back to, hey, I got to hustle and build this up again. And so he doesn't kind of rest on this big nest egg that he has, and he's always pushing it and trying to be better and grow that savings account.
I mean, everybody knows that in order to grow a muscle, you have to stretch it, right? And so in order to grow your financial muscle, you have to stretch it a little bit. So but stretch it in the right ways, right? Know the difference between an asset and a liability, right? And so stretch it in buying assets, and stretch yourself in like, okay, I'm going to buy honestly, once you get your very first investment property under your belt, gosh, it seems to just open up your world in so many ways. And don't, I've got a guy that works for me that was really wise. Even before he was married, he bought a 4-plex on an FHA loan. So he only had to be owner occupied, FHA, 4-plex. So he lived in one side, rented the other 3 sides out, did it for 6 months or 8 months or whatever that requirement was. And now he's got a 4-plex in an FHA 3% down loan that it's an amazing product that he and that was his very first investment property, and he cash flows like crazy on that thing now because he bought it 6 years ago.
He didn't at the beginning, but I'm sure he is now.
And now he's killing it, know. And so it took some time. So again, time plus consistency equals success. So anyways, I don't know. We got off on that tangent. That wasn't even one of your questions. Sorry that I just got into it.
But I want to come back to one of the comments you made earlier. You said, why don't we start and open up an office in St. George? At the time, if I'm hearing you right, you were commuting, doing some work in Utah County and Washington
Correct.
County.
Yeah.
What was the balance at that time?
So I would come down once a week to do like 5 or 6 or 10 appraisals, depending on how many orders we got down here with that company. So I would down, drive down, do all my appraisals, and then drive to Utah County, and then type them up. And
okay, so you do the inspections all in one day.
And then go up north. So it was getting, it was long days, and I finally said, I think there's enough work down there where we can do this, and so we just made the jump.
How common is that? How common is it that we have Utah County-based companies coming down to Washington in our current market doing what you did back when you started?
I don't know. I don't see it very often, but I don't know. I think when the economy slowed down in 2022, I think we're seeing a little bit more of it as especially on the appraisal side of things. When things slow down, what appraisers do is expand their coverage areas to be able to pick up more, and as time's good, then they hone their zone in a little bit and say, like, I don't want to go outside of 10 miles from my house. There's that much work that they can do that. So
2 years ago when no one wanted to go to Bryan Head.
Right?
Cedar,
exactly. So it was, so I think we see a little bit of it, but it's not super common.
I guess I want to ask that question because I'm curious. You started your company and in the business prior to the AMC, appraisal management company, becoming a regulatory compliant shift in the industry. Curious if that is how much of that, if there's less people doing that because of the AMC requirement.
Yeah. That AMCs will have your coverage area, and if you're not competent to do an appraisal in an area, then you shouldn't be doing an appraisal, right? So
Sure.
we have offices from Boise to Phoenix, but I personally would never try to do an appraisal in Phoenix because I don't know that market. I'm not geographically competent to do an appraisal. I don't know if this, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
It takes a minute to get geographically competent in those areas, and so all the guys that I've trained have a tie to those areas, so they're somewhat familiar with the areas that they start to open and things like that. So and they've also attached themselves or found mentors in that area that know real estate agents, other appraisers, other loan officers. They've tried to help them get competent in those areas. So
Okay.
yeah, the AMCs try to keep you away and just from those areas, and just so that you have geographical competence.
Can you actually give us just a quick overview? We'll do a macro level view of what it was like prior to the AMC.
Yeah.
What the AMC was meant to accomplish, and how you had to pivot as an appraiser and an owner of an appraisal company.
Yeah, great question. So prior to 2009, when the Frank-Dodd Act came out, it was later changed to a different things, but we'll refer to it as the Frank-Dodd. Business was easy, right? So it was I could walk into to a bank or to a mortgage company and introduce myself and say, hey, I do appraisals. Here's what my services are. This is what I offer. We'd love to do business with you. Give me a shot, right? And they'd say, yeah, we'll give you a shot. And they'll email me an order, right? It was very easy to gain business that way. Now, if I go in to introduce myself to a new loan officer and they say, yeah, we want to use you, we'll try to get you on our panel. So now this appraisal, the appraisal management companies were instituted, were legislated basically to put a barrier in between the appraisers and the loan originator, so that no undue influence would be on the appraiser. So unfortunately, there was some situations back in 2005 to 2007 or 4 to 7 or whatever it was, where a loan officer would say, hey, I need extra value on this. We've got to cover the closing costs, or hey, we need this that didn't come in where it needed to on this refinance. We're short. Can you bump this appraisal up, right? So there was some of that going on that if you don't have a backbone to say like, nah, it's just not there. I'm sorry, it's just not there. I mean, our appraiser's perfect? Absolutely not. We make mistakes all the time. I'll be the first to admit it when I've made a mistake. And so the appraisal management companies were instituted to help regulate the communication between the loan officers and the appraisers and make that third party so that there wasn't any undue influence on their values.
So just so I'm crystal clear, and for the listeners, a link to the chain was added, separating the appraisal and the lender.
Correct.
Which then adds an extra cost because now there's another individual helping facilitate that.
Correct.
But it was there to help mitigate any pressure that an appraiser might be receiving to hit a target value.
Correct.
And do something that's not
ethical.
Ethical. Okay.
Yeah.
So that when you add an extra link to the chain, it adds time and it adds money. Mm-hmm. What else am I missing?
It adds, or it takes away personal relationships.
Sure.
So, and that's a hard, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a people person. I like to know who I'm dealing with. And if there's a problem, I like to communicate that problem. It took away our ability to communicate with our clients, really. Yeah. So you can still do it. It just adds a third layer, and things get lost in translation, right? Yeah. So if we've got a concern about a house that may be like an FHA concern where there's chipping paint, to get ahead of the ball, sometimes I would call the lender and be like, hey, just so you know, Ben, this house doesn't meet FHA guidelines. There's chipping paint. If you'll get ahead of it, that way we can get the ball rolling, right? AMC's kind of took that away, and so now it takes it takes a lot longer to get through the appraisal process instead of like.
So, if you don't mind, let's actually go into maybe what are the mechanics? What are the steps of receiving the order? How you actually appraise before you send a formal report to a lender? So I'll start off because it usually starts with us. Whether we have a refinance, whether we have a purchase contract, we will officially send an order over through an email service or through a browser to an appraisal management company. And on that company will have a panel of approved appraisers. That panel, person managing that panel will turn around and place an order with you, and it's usually in some kind of sequence or order, mm-hmm. so we can't choose who it actually goes to. You receive that order in the form of an email. What do you do with it from there?
Yeah. So our process is probably a little different than most, but I'll talk in generalities here. So we get the order, and then we'll usually call the contact information of who to schedule the appraisal with. So that's the very first. We'll schedule it usually with the listing agent if it's for a purchase, right? If it's for a refinance, then we'll call the homeowner and we'll schedule an appraisal appointment. Then we start doing all of the back end work.
How far out from? Is it usually the next day? How quickly are you getting?
Usually the next day. I mean, we want to try to expedite that process, because once it's scheduled, then we can do all the back end work. And we try to. I mean, time is money, and time is of the essence. So we really want to hone in our ability to turn appraisals quick, because really, an appraisal is an appraisal, right? And whether I do it or my competitor does it, the only thing that can separate me is time and quality. And so I want to be able to be the fastest I can possibly be in turning my appraisals quickly. So as soon as I get an order, I try to get it scheduled for the next day or the day after. And then we pull all of the county records, the year built, the taxes, the legal description, the parcel, plat maps, if it's been listed on the MLS, we look at if it's sold in the last 3 years. We gather all of this information. We're trying to solve a problem, right? We're trying to solve what's the value of this particular home. And so we have to gather all this information in order to solve this problem. So we gather the information, then I'll go to the property and I'll continue my gathering of information of how big is the house, what's the quality of the house, what's the condition of the house, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, has it been remodeled, have any of the mechanical systems been replaced, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm still gathering all this information to try to solve my problem. So once the inspection takes place, I go back to my office, and I start filling out a report, and I start plugging in all of the data that I've gathered, the year built, and I start building my report. And then that's kind of the mechanical part of the appraisal process. Then we get into the artistic part of the appraisal process. I really feel like it's an art. Like it takes. I mean, I've been doing this 20 years, and I still am learning the process of selecting the most appropriate comparable sales to represent the property, and how to make market-driven adjustments. You know, a lot of people will ask me, well, in fact, I was asked this morning, how much money would I make if I remodeled my bathroom? And that's it's kind of a loaded question, because we don't go off of what it costs to remodel your bathroom. We go off of what is someone willing to pay for the remodeled bathroom. And so you've got to extract information from the market in order to know how to make that adjustment. So once I've entered all of my mechanical data, then I go to the artistic part, and I start gathering information on other houses that are very similar to that within the subject neighborhood first. And then I go out, if there's no comparables, then I go out a little bit further, and then I go out a little bit further to find the most appropriate and comparable property sales. And then I make those market-driven adjustments to come up with a value. So, I mean, and then once I've determined my value, then I send it back to the appraisal management company, who sends it back to the lender. So that's the whole process. I mean, that's a long explanation of what we do, but or a short explanation for a long process of how we do it. It usually takes about 3 to 4 days to be able to do the appraisal process from A to Z.
So great. I'm trying to draw some parallels to the mortgage industry that we're more familiar with. Different loan officers have reputations for different styles, right? You got one that's super into the weeds with details and guidelines, but may lack in some of the people skills, sales side. Curious from an appraiser, how do you look at that on when you line up 5 appraisers, they all go out and do the same property? You may have, due to the artistic side, totally different reports, all within maybe a similar range. How would you expound on that one appraiser compared to the next?
Yeah. Each one has their own style, right? Each one has their own, they've been trained different ways. They have their own way of extracting data from the market. Each of them have their own ability to communicate, things like that. Like you definitely, I mean, you probably see this more than I do, because I have my style, right? And I've trained 12 guys on how to do appraisals, and each one has their own style. I don't want them to do it the same way that I do it, right? You have to find your own style. There's some principles that govern us, and you kind of have the same overall way of doing it, but you also have to do it the way that you feel comfortable doing it. No appraiser does it the exact same way. They're trying to standardize that. It's going to be really interesting over the next little bit to see how blockchain technology and AI affect the appraisal industry. I'm really curious to see how that affects things, and how this next chapter of the appraisal industry moves into blockchain and AI. That's another podcast, but it's going to affect all of us in this industry some way or another. So, but each appraiser has their own style. I guess that's the only way to say it. Some are more speed, right? Like, hey, I get an order, I'm going to turn it quickly, and their quality may be lower.
And maybe you've hit up on this already, or highlighted it. What separates you apart, you've highlighted, is speed. But something I've noticed, and Shaun, I'd love to get you to expound on it. Being someone on the other side of the fence dealing with that report, you have always been very approachable for me as a lender to call and say, hey, your value came in low. Could you give me some insight so that I can be better equipped when I explain this to the consumer about XYZ, right? You've always been very open to have the dialogues, have the questions, be very approachable. And I find that's a huge value, where we've got other appraisers that won't even take the phone call.
Yeah.
That is a huge value add for me. Shaun, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's it's important, because sometimes you know stuff that we don't know, and then vice versa, right?
Yeah.
We might just know of something that closed on the same street like a day or two ago, and maybe you inspected it the day before, or whatever. And so, just having that open communication and just be willing to work, and say, hey, if the home really is not worth this, like, it is what it is.
For sure.
Know?
Well, and I think that's one thing that the AMC took away that really was that hurt our business, right? Because it's, after all, like, I stand by my values. I want to be able to say, like, hey, I believe that this is what the property's worth, and I'm going to give you the most. If something comes in short, there's a really good reason why I came in short, right? And I've done, if I'm going to not hit a purchase price, I have gone through it A to Z. I've not only put my eyes on it, but I usually will grab Nick and be like, dude, I'm $50,000 short on this. Am I seeing this right? Can you pull some comps? Let me get your eyes, your independent eyes on this to see. So I've got another appraiser that's looking at it as well. And then I'll call both agents. I'll call the real estate agent, the listing agent, the buyer's agent. And I'll usually say, like, hey, what comparables did you use to list this property? Can I see your CMA? Can you send me your CMA? And sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. and they'll be like, you know what, the client just wanted to list it at that, and we got an offer. Okay, that really puts me in a tough situation, right? So I have to be able to back that up somehow. If it's just a number that's out there, then it makes it hard. So communicating with everybody and letting them know why, that separates us for sure. And it's not that we're going to be influenced and say like, well, you need to come in higher. Like, look, I'm open to seeing the data, but at the end of the day, I have to be able to support my value. So I'm not gonna. There's a period for responding, right? Of like, hey, I'm gonna be there. This came in short. You can submit a reconsideration of value, and we can look at this again if you want to. But this is how I saw it. How do you guys see it? Right.
And let me pause on that. For those who are listening who don't understand what a reconciliation of value is, it's when a report from an appraiser is sent in. Lender looks at it and they feel like there may be information that the appraiser didn't have that could impact value.
Correct.
So there's this window of time that a lender, a real estate agent, any party involved can formally submit that information back to the AMC and then the AMC back to the appraiser to be reconsidered.
Right.
How often will you get a request that you actually change a report?
Like I said, if we're going to come in short, there's usually a good reason why we
feel
came
like you've
in short.
exhausted stuff.
We've exhausted stuff. But there's times where, oh yeah, we missed it. Like I don't know why that comparable didn't come up on my initial search, but I missed it. Yeah. Let's go back and change
or
that.
a for sale by owner.
Right.
There could be things that's not on the MLS.
Or an option sheet, right? Like a both of you work with builders where a buyer's option sheet, an upgrade sheet didn't get included with the appraisal, and we went in during drywall stage and we didn't realize that they're having marble from Italy imported, and that may or may not impact value, but like you know what I mean? So there's reasons why you can change an appraisal. Usually it's because you've missed some type of comparable or something like that. Yeah. So
the one thing with buyers at least, when we're talking about the appraisal, because when it comes back, I always like to talk it over with them, and so they understand is they don't realize that you actually get a copy of the purchase contract. Mm-hmm. And so for a lot of times they're like, oh, it came in right at value. Yeah. Like, what does that mean in your world? Or what advice would you give to like a homeowner if it comes in at or higher, or,
That just means both agents did their job appropriately. Okay. I mean, that just means they hired a good real estate agent because that came in right where the value should be, right? I mean, let's be honest, no appraiser, I don't care how long you've been doing it, is that good, right? Mm-hmm. What we look at is marketing time. How long was this house on the market? Did it have enough exposure to the general population to attract a fair price, right? Mm-hmm. One of the definitions of market value is a willing and informed buyer and a willing and informed seller coming to an agreed upon price, right? And so not just because someone's willing to pay that, they have to be informed. They have to be in the market. So those are some of the questions I'll ask an agent. Hey, how long was your buyer in the market? Was this the first house they saw? Or was this the 10th house they saw, right? So I know that they're informed, right? They know what else is out there on the market. I'll ask the agent, how long was this listed? How many times did you show it? Do you have any backup offers? That sort of thing. All of that plays into what market value is. Market value is, a lot of people say like, so, and there's three different approaches to value. There's the sales comparison approach, which is the market value. Then the cost approach, which is the cost to build minus the depreciation. And then the income approach, which is usually reserved for income, like commercial properties or investment properties, things like that. They use the income approach. So when a bank hires us, they want us to come up with what the market value is using the sales comparison approach. So long story short is the market value is what is the general market willing to pay for this house? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So exposure time, how long was it on the market? How many people walked through it? How many price reductions did they have? Mm-hmm. Did they start at $700,000 and drop to $675,000 and then drop to $650,000 and then drop to $639,000 and then they got an offer at $635,000? That tells me that it's not worth $700,000, right? I can't appraise it at $700,000 because it had incremental price decreases. And so this is a big thing for agents. If I've got exposure time and I've got incremental decreases in my value, and I get an offer at 630 or 735, and they want to include $15,000 in concessions, you can't raise that price up to 750, because if it was worth 750, why didn't it sell at 749 when it was listed there for 60 days? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I can't appraise it at 750 when it's been on the market for 2 months at 750 and it didn't sell for that. So we know that the market value is 735, and the concessions have to go on the bottom of that, not on the top of that.
What you're describing to me is the art that you're talking about.
Right.
It's I think there's things in your world that are very scientific, right? That you have to bracket properties. You need to find comps that are at least, one in the subject subdivision, one out. There's these mathematical things that you have to implement, but what you just described to me is that the art of it. Like, can I build a story here to show where my value is coming from and have it backed up with data?
Correct. Yeah.
Another big one I get from homeowners or clients we work with is, before I list my house, should I get an appraisal? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea, because it's an independent, third party, unbiased opinion, right? So like a real estate agent, I mean, if you interview 5 real estate agents to list your house, they're going to be similar in values, but what's their motivation? They get paid more the higher they sell a house, right? And so, that's not a bad thing. I love agents. They're the reason why we exist, right? They do it. We work very synergetically, and I love real estate agents. But I mean, if I can sell the house for 800, and I know it's only worth 750, I'm going to try to sell it for 800, and then I'll let the appraiser figure it out, right? So they want to sell it, right? So we're not motivated by that, right? We're not motivated by how much our commission isn't based on how much it sells for or how much it doesn't sell for. We have a set price. So I do a lot of work for real estate agents that are trying that don't know how that. Are struggling with a list price. So we do quite a bit of we call them a pre-listing appraisal. So if someone wants, and this isn't, I'll probably get shot by some of the real estate agents, but there's a lot of different ways that people sell their houses on their own, through their own personal social media, through KSL, through a lot of different things, that they try to sell their house on their own. I wouldn't recommend that, because real estate agents are very specific, and they have a way of being able to get your house in front of a lot more people than you can through the multiple listing service. So I would suggest you get a real estate agent, but some people try to do that, and they can always hire us to do an appraisal to get an idea of what their house is worth before they list it.
So when you get an order like that from a consumer, that there's so it's not a lender order. Obviously, there's no purchase contract.
Right.
What questions do you ask in preparation?
I ask them. I have a standard interview questions that when did you buy the house? How much did you buy it for? What have you done to the property since you bought it? If it's been 20 years, I've lived there for 30 years or whatever, then I'll ask them, what remodels, what renovations have you done to the property? Major renovations have you done to the property? I don't need to know all the outlets that you changed or anything like that, but I want to know major renovations that we moved that wall, we redid the mechanical systems, we put a new air conditioner on it, that sort of thing. We replaced the water heater, things like that. So we want to know what... Because a house has 2 ages. They have 2 years. They have the actual year built, and then they have an effective year built. Okay, so we go off of both the actual and the effective. So the more updates you have, it makes your house effectively,
You're pulling totally different comps.
You're pulling a different comp. Yeah.
So effective date is a remodel date, essentially,
it's essentially so if a house is built 20 years ago, and so it was built in 1994. 2004. Geez, I'm 2004, right? And it's 2024. And they went through and they did a total remodel. They went down to the studs. They moved walls. They redid all of the electrical. They put all new wires in, all new switches in. They redid the kitchen. They redid all the bathrooms. It's basically a brand new house, right? So the actual age is 2004, but effectively, the only thing they didn't change was the foundation and the exterior studs. They painted the stucco. They patched all the stucco so it looks like brand new stucco. And so effectively, it may only be a 5-year-old home. So I might use comparables that are only, built in 2019 to 2024 versus houses that were built in 2004.
Interesting. So that's how it would help pull up its values,
Correct.
because there's newer homes
Correct.
they're able to
Yeah.
use the value against.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So
I want to pivot the conversation away from the appraisal side and kind of jump into your personal life, Carl.
okay.
Because we have a connection that was prior to professional. I know your passion for athletics. You were very athletic yourself growing up, and you referenced even earlier in the podcast. The first team that you coached was my sophomore football team.
Yeah.
Since then, I've watched and heard you coach every one of your kids in multiple sports, and it's a passion of yours.
Yeah.
Expound on that. Why does that inspire you the way that it does?
That's a great question, and I thought a lot about this because I'm sure people think I'm crazy because I'm that guy, right? Like, oh great, Carl's coaching the team again, right? Like, I'm that guy, like, oh great, here we go again. Carl's, can we ever get away from this guy?
Is it get away because you're more intense? Like, what? Why would you
That's
say that?
probably some of my insecurities, but sometimes it's good to have a different face out there. But here's what it is. Here's what it comes down to. There's a difference. There's things that make me happy in life. And those things that make me happy come and go. The sunshine makes me happy. Like when it's a nice day outside and here's my my hippie side coming out, whatever. Like, I love to see hummingbirds outside my house. That's one of my favorite things. I love to see the sun shining. I love to see hot air balloons. Okay, hot air balloons remind me of my mom and Harriella Wright, or Harriella Crouch. She's one of the best women out there, right? She's but when I see a hot air balloon, it makes me happy. But happiness is fleeting, right? If I don't see a hot air balloon, does that mean I'm going to have a sad day? Or if it's a rainy day, does that mean I'm going to have a sad day? Or if I don't see a hummingbird, does that mean I'm going to have a bad day? Maybe, maybe not. So happiness is fleeting. Fulfillment is more lasting. And I have found that when I coach, it fulfills me. It gives me a sense of purpose. It gives me a sense of making a difference in other people's lives. And those who I've coached and those who've been around me know that, like, my teams aren't about win. Obviously we like to win. Obviously I like to win. I'm a competitor at heart, and I think that's my competitive nature has propelled me into my career because I am competitive. I want to be the best out there. When people think appraisals in the Western United States, I want them to think R1 appraisals. I'm a competitor. I want that. That's something that I strive for. It's something that drives me. But at the end of the day, coaching for me, my parents got a divorce my parents split up when I was 10, and they got divorced when I was 16. And if I wouldn't have had football as a foundation, I would have been pretty lost in high school. And I had some key coaches, and you had the same coaches, Ben. Coach Hymas in 9th grade, he changed my life. He believed in me, right? Ron Hawkins, another one. When I was 12 years old, my parents were going through a rough patch, and I didn't have anybody to play catch with when I was growing up, and Ron Hawkins put me on the Red Sox team. It was the best team in Orem. And we ended up winning the city championship that year, and he believed in me. And I remember one time in the city championship, we were playing the Royals, and he put me in and he told me to bunt. And I was a terrible baseball player. I could not throw the ball. I could not hit the ball. I think I went 0 for whatever. I don't think I had a hit that year. So he taught me how to bunt, and so he gave me the bunt sign, because back then you have to, in Little League, you have to play your 2 innings in the field and have to have at least 1 at bat. And I was the 11-year-old on the team, and so we had all these 12-year-olds. And So I got my at bat, and he gave me the bunt sign, and I was like, I'm not gonna bunt. I'm not gonna bunt right here. And I freaking smashed a double, and John Hawkins ended up scoring the winning run, and I didn't win the game there, but that was the one run that made us to win the city championship, and Ron believed in me, and he saw something in me, and it made me feel something that I had never felt before, and so when I coached your team, that your sophomore year, something spoke to my soul that, Carl, this is something you're actually pretty good at, and it's something that you believe in, and from that moment on, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. Like, I got home from my mission. So I coached your team before my mission. I went on my mission, and I came back, and the head coach at Mountain View asked me to take over the freshman program. And so I coached the freshman program, and I was the head coach. I mean, I was 22 years old, and I was the head freshman coach, and I just loved it. Like, this, taking these kids and using the gifts and the talents that I had to serve other people, that's what brings fulfillment. And so that's why I coach. It fulfills me. It brings me, it's not happiness, it's fulfillment. And I think there's a difference between the two. It's when you use your gifts and talents in serving other people and blessing other people's lives, it brings something inside you.
Well, I know it does something to you, because coaching like that is hard and requires a ton of energy, right? Mm-hmm. It can sap you. Mm-hmm. But what I notice with you, it energizes you. Mm-hmm. You get fired up. I feel like you might go to work ready to hit it harder on a Monday after you've been coaching rather than not. Yeah. There's something to that, and it's just been fun. I'd be very curious if there was a way to collect the data to find out how many young individuals, male or female, that you have mentored, that you have taught. Because sports is way more than winning and losing. It's more than developing the skill set for that, the craft of that sport. It's watching young men and young women mature right in front of your eyes to deal with adversity, making them better human beings and citizens to society. Yeah. And I can only imagine how long that list would be of how many people you've influenced.
Well, thanks. You're kind. Part of the measuring stick is in 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, in 20 years when they're married and have kids and they still come up and say hi to me, like, that'll be, you'll never know the impact you have, but 20 years down the road, you will, and I wrote Coach Hymas a letter a while ago, and just said thanks. And that was cool. And Ron Hawkins and I have been in contact several times, and I let him know every time, just thanks for believing in me. And the power of a coach, really the power of a mentor, right? I think all of us need mentors in our life. And I think if my one takeaway today is find a mentor, find somebody that believes in you, that sees something good in you, and that gives you things to work on, right? A coach doesn't tell you everything you want to hear. He tells you everything you need to hear. And sometimes what you need to hear is hard. You know what I mean? Like, hey, listen, you're pretty slow on the bases. You need to work on your speed, right? Or, hey, you didn't open up your hips there on that drop. As a linebacker, you need to open your hips. A coach tells you what you need to do, not what you want to hear. And it takes honesty. It takes, but as you're honest with people, I think they respect you more, anyways, that's what's cool is to tie it all back to appraisals. Nick and I started, when in 2008 when we started, I was working really hard for about 7 years, and it was through that downtime and through the bottom of the market, and I thought, like, how can I'm working hard, I'm working 10, 12 hours a day, but I'm not getting ahead. Like, I'm just not getting ahead. And I kept asking the question, how can I make more money? How can I make more money? Like, how can I want to get out of this rat race, right? Or whatever. Then I was still coaching at that time. I was coaching McKay's little teams, and the thought occurred to me, like, you got to quit asking the question, how can I make more money, and start being, number one, grateful for what you have, that you have the opportunity to coach and do the things that you enjoy doing that fulfill you. A job is just secondary. But how can you help other people enjoy that same thing? And so that's when I started. That's when I made the mental shift in my mind. Instead of like just me doing all the appraisals, why don't I train people to live this, to have the same opportunities to go to all their kids' stuff, to coach if they want to do what they're passionate about, what their calling is, what their gifts are, use their gifts and talents in the blessing of other people. Because if you live a fulfilled life, if you do things that fulfill you, then work is easy. It's not a grind. It's easy, right? So then I started taking these principles of coaching, and like why I love coaching is I take young people and they become, my acronym is Mustangs because I coach at Crimson Cliffs. They become men who unconditionally serve their teammates by having a good attitude, no excuses, and great effort. That's what I'm trying to teach my freshman group now is that. And so I take those same principles and I teach that to the appraisers. I have a very specific niche of the people that I want to train. They're guys in college who may not have a direction, that are passionate about something. And so I take them, and now I've mentored them into that. So now I'm fulfilled at work too. So like, working isn't a grind for me. It's fulfilling. It brings happiness, but it brings fulfillment to me. When I write guys checks and they're like, and I see what they're doing, and I've got one guy that he's a full-time teacher. He teaches band down in Indian Springs in Nevada. He teaches band full-time because that's what brings him joy. That's what brings him fulfillment, because he wants to teach people. That's what he's good at, right? So he does that full-time, and then he appraises part-time. And I've got another guy that coaches wrestling down in Arizona, and I've got other guys that they're fulfilled doing other things. And so it gives them an opportunity to be fulfilled in life, and then they work as appraisers, So I've taken that whole principle of coaching and mentoring and using the gifts and talents that I have to bless other people. That's what brings fulfillment.
Sounds like to me, though, in order to do that the way that you're describing, you've got to know each one of your appraisers, each one of your employees at a very personal level to know what makes them tick.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that what it's all about?
It's what it should be, but we don't always see it that way, right?
Yeah. I mean, it takes conversations like this to understand, like after 5 p.m., right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It takes some of those one of my favorite things to do when I get a new trainee is that they ride around with me for like 3 weeks in my truck while they shadow me, and they have to go to like their first 30 appraisals. They accompany me, so we drive around. I get to know them really, really good for 3 weeks. I mean, they're with me for 5-6 hours a day. I get to pepper them with questions. I get to find out what makes them tick. I get to find out what they're passionate about. I get to find out all of those things. I've got a lot of questions that I ask them, and we have really deep, good conversations. So it's happening, right? And then the appraisal, the mentoring starts, and then I know, okay, where are they at, and how do I add to their blueprint for their life, and how do I get them to understand what they're good at? How do I get them to understand what their passions are? And then I can build on that from there. So,
Can I just dig a little deeper on the one thing? You brought up Coach Hymas, right? Mm-hmm. Believing in you. I'm sure all of us have had somebody we can relate to that's like had that impact on us. What are some, maybe just one or two examples of things he did that helped you believe in yourself?
Yeah. And
then to bring it around a little further and kind of like, this is going a direction that I didn't plan on, but it's this coaching and mentoring that you have on others has created this super successful business that you have. How do you then pour into other people, or how do you see something in someone else and then pour it to them so they can believe in themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Coach Hymas, he was the freshman coach at Mountain View High School. And so my 8th grade year, I broke my arm. See that scar? I broke my arm my 8th grade year, and I was playing safety because my older brother Rich played safety. So I was like, I think I'm gonna play safety, right? So I'm playing safety, and I had like 4 interceptions my 8th grade year or whatever, even with a broken arm, and so I showed up to 9th grade practice, freshman practice, and we start hitting, and he's like, "You're not a safety, you're an outside linebacker." And so he moved me from safety to outside linebacker. And he said, "You're the hardest hitter on the team. And we want you right here at this spot because our team needs you and we need you at this spot." And so that was really all he said, right? That belief in me to say, like, you're not a safety, you're an outside linebacker. And it changed that was a pivot point in my life, and it changed the trajectory of my football high school career. And just that he instilled in me that he believed in me. It wasn't anything he said, or it was just that he said, "We want you here. We believe that this is your spot." And I ran with it. So it's that, right? It was that foreknowledge. So I think helping other people find their gifts and talents is it's a process. It's a hard thing to do, right? Because I was lucky and fortunate enough to find my passion when I was 18 years old. I'm lucky because a lot of people are 40 and still don't know what they're passionate about, still don't know what their gifts and talents are. So it's a real simple thing. It's number one, asking the right question. I think our words matter. And the quality of our life depends on the quality of our questions that we ask to ourselves and that we ask to other people. So the better questions you can ask of yourself, I think the more you're going to know who you are. So have an eye of curiosity, I think changes things and it changes your perspective. So here's a simple exercise I'll give all the listeners that's this very easy to do. Like who I am, my nickname is Los, okay? Like LOS, all right? It has several different meanings, right? You remember Doug calls me Los. All of my close friends call me Los. If you guys wanted to call me Los, I would respond, okay? So Los, there's a couple meanings. And as you have a nickname, it starts to add on and on and on, right? Like, so LOS in football means line of scrimmage, okay? Everything starts and ends at the line of scrimmage. And after every play, you get back to the line of scrimmage. So one meaning of Los is that I just get back to gray. I don't get too happy. I don't get too down. I just get back to the line of scrimmage. That's where the play starts, right? So I don't hold on to the past, and I'm not anxious about the future. I start on the line of scrimmage, Los, okay? And then I define what Los means, right? Who is Los? Who is Los? So, and it's simple, right? I ask myself, what are my core values? What do I really believe in? I asked my mom, I asked my brothers, and then I took it to God. And I said, you know what? Like, you know me better than I know myself. Help me to know what my core values are. What do you think of me, right? And when you ask God that question, like, he actually responds. He actually tells you what he thinks about you. And the way you do it is just write down, like, if you get into that right mindset and you let your spirit lead, you let your soul lead and just say, hey, soul, will you talk to God right now and just get your mind and your body and everything else out of the way, and you just let your soul talk to God, like, and then I just write. So I'll write down the question, like, hey, God, what do you think of me? And then I start to write the things that come into my head. That's how God talks to me. Is just this little book I carry around. These are all all the Los impressions, right? Mm-hmm. These are the Los impressions that that come to me as I go about. So it started with 3 words: loyal, optimistic, and strong. That's what it started with. Those were my 3 core values: loyal, optimistic, and strong. And that's who I am. I'm a very loyal person. Like, Ben and I have been loyal friends for 25 plus years, for lots and lots of years, right? Nick and I, we've been loyal to each other. I mean, it's pretty rare to find a business partner that has lasted this long. And like, Nick and I are extremely loyal to each other. My wife, I'm extremely loyal to my wife. My kids, my football players. I'm a loyal person, okay? I have a pretty small circle, but I'm loyal to that circle, okay? Optimistic. I'm always trying to be optimistic. I see the bright side of things. I choose that every day. Yeah, there's a dark side of things, but I choose to be optimistic every single day. It's a choice that I make. I'm optimistic, and I'm strong. Okay, that helps me work out in the morning. It helps me be emotionally strong. It helps me be physically strong. It helps me to be strong in all aspects of my life. Okay, so it started with those 3. Once I felt like those 3 were like, okay, I've got these. That's me. I expanded it to my next 3. So my next three were loving, opportunistic, and selfless. So those were my next three. So I wanted to be loving. I wanted to show people love and kindness, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to be opportunistic. I wanted to find new opportunities to have new revenue streams. I wanted to find opportunities to serve other people. I wanted to recognize when opportunities came. So I say that to myself every morning. I am opportunistic. And then selfless, right? I want to put the needs of other people in front of my needs, or I want to use my gifts and talents to serve other people. So those are my next three. Once I felt like I had those three, I moved to my next three. Okay. And those are learned, because I want to always be learning. I want to be learning. I want to learn new things. I want to learn new ways to do appraisals. I want to learn new things. I want to read good books. I want to listen to good podcasts. I want to be the best version of me. Right. And you do that by learning. And then the next one was open. I want to be open to new ideas. I want to be open to I am open to new ideas. I'm open to new relationships. I'm open to new friendships. I'm open to new whatever, right? I'm open to receive revelation. I'm open to receive love. I'm open to receive. I'm just an open, right? I want to be open. And then the last one, you guys will think this is funny, but it's a sage, okay? Do you know what a sage is?
Sagebrush.
It's like a wizard.
So right, you're both right. So you're both right. So sage, I go through like a little ritual in the morning. My morning routines are like everything to me. So I go through this morning ritual where I use sagebrush to cleanse and cleanse the space. And so I cleanse myself and cleanse the space, that I get rid of any evil, right, or whatever. And then a sage is like, you call it a wizard, but it's like a very knowledgeable person, a wise person, right? So like, I want to be a sage. I want to be known as like that wise old man. I mean, I got the gray hair, like I want to be this sage guy, right? So that's the last one. Those are the three that I'm working on this year. Is what were they? Learned, open, and sage. So that's what I do. I'm a big I am person. So like, this is my journal, right? So like, I write them down, and these are the ones that I So this is my book. I just take it around with me everywhere I go, because I never know when things are gonna pop in my mind or when I'm gonna be open to something. But if more things happen when I have an opportunity to write them down. So. Anyways, that was a lot about me, and that's what makes me tick. Those are the things. I haven't shared that with hardly anybody, but that's who I am. So
I think that's super cool. And so to tie that back into like having someone, if they're trying to mentor somebody else, I mean, you're always like developing yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And are you looking for those qualities in other people to start pouring into them, or what's that?
They have to find out what those qualities are, right?
Okay.
So I help them define, like, okay, who are you? Mm-hmm. What makes you tick? What are you? You know what I mean? And so you start to find those words that make you tick. Mm-hmm. So, and you start by asking, like I said, you start by asking yourself, asking God, and asking 3 or 4 people that you trust. Hey, give me 5 words that you would describe me. Right? Give me 5 words that you would describe me as. And then you compare and contrast it. And then once my mom, mom and my list might have one word that's in common. Well, that might be the word that's there. So maybe it was like, I don't know, loving, right? So that might go on my list. And then if loving doesn't match a word in my name, then I might go to the thesaurus, and I might find a word that's a synonym to love and put it in my name. And I look at the dictionary, I look at the definitions, and I really make sure that I know what that really means, right? Mm-hmm. Is that me? Is that really me? And I ask that question, is that really me? Does that really define who I am? And if it resonates, then yes. If it doesn't, then I move on to the next word. Mm-hmm. So that's how I help people find out who they really are, because you can't serve other people until you know who you really are, mm-hmm. right? So that's part of the mentoring process, is you got to find out who you are first. And then that's the first process of who are you really, and then what are you passionate about, and then we go from there.
So I was a part of a similar exercise once where I asked 5-6 people to do the same thing. And I think it can go both ways, positive and negative. You can find things that are good qualities, but you can also find things that are not the greatest qualities. You're like, if I'm dead and gone and people are reflecting back on the life of Ben McAfee, do I really want Diet Coke to be one of the first things that goes to their mind? And if it is, then you better start making some changes, right?
Right.
I guess I just wanted to share that with you, saying it goes both ways. And the people that you're reaching out to, the mentors that you're talking about, will tell you the hard things, even when you don't want to hear them, because they care.
Because they care, right.
And that's the beauty of the mentorship is, hey, in the Dr. or Diet Coke example, it's like, maybe that's something I need to work on. It might be hard to hear and you have to give up, maybe, some sort of addiction you have,
right.
but it's only going to help you be better. And that's what the mentor, they can see the things you can't see.
Right.
It's like, what's the analogy? When you're standing in front of a tree, you can only see the tree, but the mentor can see you and then see the whole forest,
right.
and then help you guide you through that.
Yeah. I love that.
Well, this conversation's been very inspiring to me. I appreciate you taking the time with us, Carl. I would like to ask, as we come to a wrap, anyone who's listening, I challenge you to share this podcast. Share it with someone. Give a little bit of thought, and share it with someone that could impact them, whether it's someone that might need a mentor, want to mentor, or maybe it's a loan officer, real estate agent that could benefit from part of the appraisal talk. But please share it with 3 people that could benefit from the podcast. Again, Carl, thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you
thanks,
for
Carl.
having me. I appreciate you guys.
Do we have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay, you mentioned your sage morning routine, and I know sometimes morning routines, can change your whole day, your whole life, 1 step at a time.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing your morning routine with us?
Oh man, it's the reason for morning routines is that we are pulled in so many different directions, right? So, and especially as a mentor, if you're mentoring other people, and all of us are mentors in some capacity or another, right? I think moms and dads are the greatest mentors ever, right? And your cup has to be full as a mentor. So if you aren't filling your cup, then you're not going to have anything to give. So your morning routine is, whether it's a morning routine or an evening routine, there has to be some type of routine in your life that separates you from everything else that you're doing. That's you time. That's you and you connecting with you, right? We connect with our spouses, we connect with our kids, we connect with our associates at work, we connect with our clients, we connect. But when do you connect with you? You have to find time to connect with you. And so my morning routine starts, it actually starts the night before, and I usually will make a little, protein shake or a green shake the night before, so that I'm not. I also like to sleep. I like to have my rest, and I'm not a morning person by nature. So the more I can automate or process it the night before. This is James Clear stuff on Atomic Habits, right? So I automate it the night before. So I know what I'm going to be wearing, so I don't have to make that decision in the morning. I have my shake already made in the fridge, so I don't have to do that. So I wake up, I grab my shake, I go into a designated place that I have set apart as my space. That's it. Like, no, other people can come in there, but that's my place. That's my space. It used to be my shed. I used to go out in my shed early in the morning, and I had my propane tanks. I'd light my propane tanks in the winter, and that was my place. And I actually miss my shed time, and because my sage stinks up the house, and like I could burn as much sage as I wanted out in my shed, and so now I have an office in my house that is my office, right? But it doesn't have to be an office. It doesn't have to be a shed. It can be your spot on the couch, but it just has to be consistent, a spot. So have a place that you can go, and then I start with a prayer. I usually kneel down, and I say a prayer, and I connect with heaven, and that's the number one thing. I connect with heaven, and then I ask for certain things in that prayer that'll have eyes to see and ears to hear, and I just connect with heaven. The next thing I do is I journal. I write down 3 things that I'm thankful for, and I actually they can't be, it has to be felt, right? Like, gratitude has to be felt. I don't just write down like, I'm thankful for my wife. That's pretty shallow, right? It has to be something deep, and you got to feel it. So like, I'm thankful for the way my wife laughs when she talks to Porter. I love it. I love it because I see the connection between Porter and my wife, and I know that they love each other, right? Like, so it has to be something that's felt. Okay. So I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. And then I go through my saging routine. I have some sage, and I'm weird, I know, but it's,
You just burn it for a couple minutes, or
well, no, I don't smile. No, I don't do any of that. Yeah, we don't smoke or anything. Like, so I have this sage concoction. It's California white sage, and then I put some sweetgrass in it, and I put some copal in it, and I put some frankincense and myrrh, and I put some palo santo in it, and I have this little concoction, and I burn that, and then I go through a routine that just cleanses my body, and cleanses the space that I'm in, and it's me just connecting in it. And for me, it's like, it's a trigger. Like you've heard of triggers, right? Like, some people that are alcoholics have triggers for the wrong type of triggers, right? But there can be good triggers. So sage is a trigger for me to get into my spiritual self. Does that make sense? So that's why I burn sage.
Where did that originate? Where did you start doing that? Like,
my uncle Scott, he kind of introduced it to me, and everybody was like, Scott's going off the deep end, you know? Like, he's crazy, and like, he introduced it to me, and I started learning about saging. Again, in my morning routines, I started to like, what is saging and what's the purpose of it? So I started reading more about American Indian and why they sage and what the purpose of it is and how it has medicinal value, not only to your body, but to your soul, and how it cleanses the space that you're in and things like that. So I was like, that's kind of cool. So I started doing it, and like, I really enjoyed it. And so it's just stuck. It's been one of those things that's just like one of my core things. So now I'm a sage, you know? So like,
I'm going to start burning sage in my oldest son's bedroom.
Dude, I'm telling you, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. It makes a difference. It for me at least. Yeah. So the smell of it gets me into my spiritual self, and it gets me into this spiritual place that it usually takes me a long time to get into. You know, when you get into that flow state where you're like, when you're working and everything's just clicking, you know what I mean? For me, burning sage, it gets me into the spiritual place like almost immediately. And so I like that, right? I like that, whether it's the smell of it or whether it's the process of it, I don't know what it is, but for me, it just gets me into my spiritual self really fast. And then I can start connecting with who I really am, and connecting to my higher self. So that's why I burn sage. So I burn sage, and then I'll do some studying. I don't open my, nothing work related, nothing football related, no phones, no nothing. Like, this is all reading and writing. And I like journaling with like a pencil, because there's something about when the pencil hits the paper and you like form the letters. There's something that like writes it in your mind and in your heart versus typing. Like, typing is good and you can go faster, but it doesn't like write it on your heart, if that makes sense. And so I found that when I write it's more impressionable on my soul. So.
And how long is this routine? Is that everything then?
Yeah, that's usually everything. And then it varies, right? Like 10 minutes sometimes is minimum. And I've like, when I was really like into it, I'd go like 2 hours sometimes. Oh, wow. Like, so when I was deep into like a really like top topic that I was really interested in, like I could spend 2 hours in there just like, wow, this is mind blowing. You know what I mean? You get into a topic and it was so, but right now in my stage of life, I'm like 10 minutes, maybe 20, and that's it. So it doesn't take a long time. And then after I do that, then I go out and cook my boys breakfast to get them off to school. And then I exercise for 20 minutes. It's not a hard exercise. I just move my body, or I lift weights for 20 minutes. And then I'll usually cold plunge. And then I have a sauna in my, like a steam shower. And so I'll cold plunge, steam shower, and then I'm off to work. So,
and then it's just life.
Then life happens. Yeah. So like, but that's that's my me time. My morning times are sacred to me. They're like a one of those non-negotiables that, like, if I don't get to it, my day doesn't go quite as well. So it's filling my bucket and filling me, and because I know that, you know, as a business owner and as running an appraisal office, that's a lot of people call me for different reasons, coaching and mentoring. We have right now, so I'm the freshman coach at Crimson, and right now, just for weights, we're having 70 kids show up every morning for weights. So that's 70 kids plus 4 more coaches that you know require some of my energy. So if my energy isn't full, like, it's not going to be a great day. So I have to make sure that I am filling my bucket before I leave my house. So yeah,
awesome.
That's my morning routine.
So good. Yeah.
This is inspiring to me, the journal side of it, and carrying that with you everywhere you go. I'm an avid hunter, right? Big game hunter. Mm-hmm. Deer and elk, antelope, they're my passion. And people often ask, like, that don't quite understand it. A lot of the time, it's the windshield time just going to the hunt, right? Mm-hmm. Coming and going, where I will have some more of the spiritual experiences I've had because there's nothing to listen to, or I choose not to listen to anything, and you're in your own thoughts. Mm-hmm. But I love the idea, and maybe I'll start implementing it, is those thoughts need a place to be written down so they stick, so they stay with you. So thanks for your example. Yeah.
Well, it works for me. It may not work for everybody, right? But it works for me, and it's something that has stuck for me. Mm-hmm. I've carried, I don't know when I got this particular journal, this leather journal, but it's stuck with me for lots of years. And the nice thing is it's refillable. So I just take this out when I'm done with it, and I put another one in, and so I've got, you know, stacking up, and that'll be a fun thing to give to my kids someday. You know, they'll read through this and be like, Dad really was crazy, you know, and or they'll be like, gosh, Dad really loved me, you know, because I put some of my deepest thoughts and things in there. You know what I mean? It's just it's ideas. It's everything for me.
And like you said, handwriting matters. My mother-in-law for Christmas gave my daughter last year a recipe book that was all handwritten. So she took some of her 10, 15 recipes that she loved and wrote them by hand. And it wasn't until later that I realized how cool that will be when she's no longer around, mm-hmm. and she's got her handwriting. There's something about it.
Yeah.
It lives on.
Yeah, it does. That reminds me of my paternal grandma. She had really unique handwriting. And when you got a handwritten letter from grandma, like it was, and she handwrote everything, and like birthday cards and everything. She was awesome. So like it puts kind of your stamp on it, your seal kind of, and that you took the time and effort to actually handwrite a note. Like, it's kind of cool. Yeah, kind of cool. So
awesome, Carl. Thank you. Okay. I appreciate
you guys. Again, thanks for having me, you guys. I really am flattered that I'm one of your first guests. I hope that this podcast, you know, continues for lots of years for you, and you have lots of success through this.
Well, I have a feeling we'll probably have you back on at some point.
I hope so. Yeah. I've really enjoyed this. It's been fun.
Okay. So. Well, thanks. We'll call it a wrap.